Did you know that on a farm in the United States, there lived a man who took the lives of several people and used their skin to make furniture? No, it's not a horror story, although it did inspire several. We are talking about Edward Theodore Gein, a solitary farmer from Wisconsin who in the 1950s hid secrets so disturbing that they forever marked the history of crime in the United States. It all began in November of 1957 when a woman named Bernice Worden mysteriously disappeared. The authorities started to investigate, and all the clues led them to a farm in a small town. What they found there not only solved the disappearance, it revealed something much darker. Inside the house, there was a scene that no one could have imagined. Objects made from human parts, macabre decorations, and signs of strange rituals. The authorities confirmed that it was not just a murderer, but someone who lived surrounded by remains taken from cemeteries and crime scenes. Ed's story did not end in headlines. Over time, it inspired characters in dozens of movies, books, and nightmares that marked generations. But beyond fiction, there was an even more unsettling truth, which became one of the darkest chapters of crime in the United States. And today we will tell you about it in this video. Hello, I'm Carlos, and today I bring you one of the most shocking stories you will ever hear. A case that, although it happened more than 60 years ago, continues to be a subject of debate and fascination to this day. This case shook not only the United States, but also left a deep mark on popular culture, inspiring some of the most iconic villains in horror cinema. But before we start, I want to know where you are watching us from. Leave me your comment down below. We love to know from which part of the world you are joining us, because this space is yours and we build it together, always remembering those who can no longer tell their story. If you are passionate about true crimes, those that really give you goosebumps, subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our videos, because what you are going to hear today is as real as it is terrifying. On the calm morning of November 16, 1957, the inhabitants of Plainfield, a small town in Wisconsin, woke up without imagining that the day would mark a before and after in their history. Bernice Worden, 58 years old, a respected widow and owner of the local hardware store, had disappeared without a trace. Her absence coincided with the opening of deer hunting season, so many of the town's men were in the woods, and the streets, unusually quiet, seemed to be engulfed in an unsettling calm. That tranquility was shattered in the late afternoon, around 5, when Frank Worden, the county sheriff's deputy and Bernice's son, entered his mother's store and faced a disturbing scene. The cash register was open, and there were bloodstains covering the wooden floor. The horror had begun. The investigators started reconstructing the events and soon found a revealing clue among the day's business records. The last receipt written by Bernice corresponded to the sale of a gallon of antifreeze. Frank then remembered a conversation that raised alarms. A solitary and eccentric man known to everyone as Ed had been in the store the night before and had mentioned that he would return for that same product. Ed, 51 years old, was seen by his neighbors as a peculiar but harmless character. He did occasional jobs and babysat from time to time. However, that night his name became the main focus of suspicion. The authorities found him at a grocery store where he had dined with some neighbors, a detail that starkly contrasted with the image that was about to crumble. The officers headed to Ed's farm, an isolated and dilapidated property. The rural Wisconsin night enveloped the scene, and without electricity at the site, the officers relied on generators, spotlights, and flashlights to make their way through the darkness. The inspection began in a shed where the first of many gruesome discoveries was made. Hanging upside down from a crossbeam with ropes on the wrists and a bar on the ankles was the decapitated body of Bernice. Her torso had been opened, with the viscera removed and prepared as if it were a freshly dressed deer. An autopsy would later confirm that she had been killed with a .22 caliber rifle, and that all the horrible mutilations had been performed after her execution. But that was just the beginning. What followed was a succession of discoveries that defied all logic and humanity. Masks made of human skin, furniture upholstered with human remains, and a house transformed into a museum of horror. Among the remains, 2 victims were identified: Bernice's head in a burlap sack, her heart in a bag on the stove, and the head of another woman kept in a box, along with a mask made from her face, which was later identified as belonging to a tavern owner who had disappeared 3 years earlier. The initial inventory detailed a collection of atrocities that shook the nation. Human bones used as decoration, skulls fixed to the bedposts, others turned into bowls, a wastebasket made of human skin, as well as chairs and lamps also made with human remains. In addition, 9 facial masks made from female skin were found, a corset of flayed torso, leggings of human skin, a belt of nipples, vulvas preserved in a shoebox, noses, lips used as a blind cord, and preserved female nails. The most disturbing piece was a woman's suit, a kind of vest made with skin and flesh from a woman's torso, including the breasts. The artifacts were photographed by the State Crime Lab and later decently disposed of according to reports. The house reflected the fractured mind of this subject. He kept his mother's rooms intact as a pristine sanctuary, while the rest of the house had turned into a workshop of horrors. This physical division revealed a deep psychological split. He revered his mother as a sacred figure, while in his profane space he enacted violent fantasies with women who resembled her. While the officers processed the scene, a question echoed in the minds of the entire community. How had an apparently ordinary man hidden such a monstrous secret and lived among his neighbors as a ghoul without raising suspicion? The answer, like the horror itself, lay in the darkest corners of his past, so it is necessary to go back in time and explore the isolation and psychological torment that marked his early years. Edward Theodore Gein was born on August 27, 1906 in La Crosse, a modest city in Wisconsin, where life unfolded between work and community. He was the younger of 2 children of George Philip Gein and Augusta Wilhelmina. His father, a carpenter and firefighter, was a violent alcoholic who took out his anger on his wife and children, leaving Ed with permanent hearing damage due to the beatings. Augusta, for her part, was a religious fanatic, obsessed with the idea of sin, especially the immorality of women. She read to children biblical passages about death, divine punishment, and the depravity of the world, shaping their minds with constant fear. Ed and his older brother, Henry, grew up under her strict control. But while Henry showed some rebelliousness, Ed idolized his mother, seeing her as an almost divine figure. In 1914, when Ed was 8 years old, his mother decided to further isolate her family. They all moved to a farm of about 62 hectares located on the outskirts of Plainfield, Wisconsin, a remote place where she could protect her children from external influences. Ed's childhood was a whirlwind of loneliness and discipline. Augusta punished any attempt to socialize, forcing him to perform exhausting tasks on the farm and filling his nights with sermons about human wickedness. At the local school, Ed was a shy child, mocked for his oddities, like laughing for no apparent reason or speaking in a low voice. His classmates saw him as strange, and the teachers noticed his difficulty connecting with others. The beatings from his father and the physical changes of his mother reinforced his withdrawal, creating an aversion to sex and an emotional dependence on Augusta, who became the center of his existence. Ed's adolescence brought no relief. He dropped out of high school to work on the farm, following his mother's orders. While Henry began to question maternal authority, Ed absorbed every word of her sermons, trapped in a sexual and emotional confusion that isolated him even more. His world was reduced to the farm, religious books, and the fantasies that began to form in his mind. He had no close friends or relationships outside the family, and his personality became increasingly eccentric, marked by inexplicable laughter and a growing interest in macabre subjects. On the 1st of April 1940, Ed's life changed drastically. His father passed away from heart failure at 66 years old, leaving him and his brother Henry under Augusta's total control. Tensions between the brothers grew as Henry openly criticized their mother's ideas, which made Ed uncomfortable as he revered her. A little over 4 years later, on May 16, 1944, Henry died under suspicious circumstances during a forest fire near the farm. His body showed bruises on the head, but the authorities declared it an accident due to asphyxiation and heart failure. Although charges were never proven, some suspected that Ted, unable to tolerate Henry's criticisms of Augusta, might have murdered him. With his brother gone, Ed was left alone with his mother, thus strengthening his obsession. However, his life took an unexpected turn on December 29, 1945, when his mother passed away after a stroke, leaving 39-year-old Ed completely alone. Her death devastated him. He preserved Augusta's room as a sanctuary, keeping it spotless while the rest of the farm fell into disrepair, filled with trash and clutter. He lived in deplorable conditions, sleeping on a dirty cot and cooking on an old stove. To support himself, he received agricultural subsidies and worked in odd jobs like pruning or on the municipal road, where neighbors saw him as an efficient but peculiar man. He talked about strange topics, like Nazi medical experiments, or laughed for no reason, but no one considered him dangerous. He had no romantic relationships, and his interest was focused on middle-aged, robust, maternal women who reminded him of his mother. Additionally, he read magazines about cannibalism and atrocities, fascinated by figures like Ilse Koch, who used human skin in concentration camps. Around the year 1947, Ed's mind began to unravel. His obsession with his mother and his fascination with human anatomy led him to an aberrant act, grave robbing. By reading obituaries in local newspapers, he identified recent burials of women who resembled Augusta, robust in build and of mature age. At night, he visited cemeteries, digging in the soft earth of fresh graves about 60 centimeters deep. He extracted whole bodies or specific parts, like heads and skins, which he took to his farm. Ed confessed to having visited up to 40 graves, although at least 9 were confirmed. He was not a necrophile or a cannibal, according to his confession, but he tanned the skins to create macabre objects, including facial masks and dresses that he wore to dance under the moon. His goal was to become his mother, imitating her presence by dressing in these creations. On December 8, 1954, Ed crossed an even darker threshold and committed what is believed to have been his first crime. It was Mary Hogan, about 54 years old, a robust divorced woman and owner of a tavern. Known as Bloody Mary for her crude and libertine personality, this woman was the opposite of Augusta's Puritanism, but her maternal build made her a perfect target for Ed, who, being a regular customer of the tavern, took her life with a shot to the head with a rifle. Then he decapitated her body, which weighed more than 90 kilograms, and transported it on a sled to his farm. There he used her skull as a bowl and her skin for a mask. In the tavern, the police found blood and a bullet casing, but the disappearance did not raise immediate suspicions in the rural community, and the case remained unsolved for years. Thus, we arrive at November 16, 1957, when after Bernice's crime, the authorities searched the farm and discovered the horror described at the beginning. Bernice's murder became Ed's second confirmed killing. Like Mary, she was a woman of robust figure who evoked her mother. In addition to the bodies of both, the authorities also collected evidence of the exhumations, masks, organs, and objects made of human skin. Ed was formally arrested and taken to the sheriff's office without resistance, and during the interrogations, he confessed to the crimes of both women. In the case of Bernice, he recounted that he entered the store under the pretext of buying antifreeze and ended her life with a shot to the head. He gutted her body like a deer, decapitated her, and hung her upside down in a shed on his farm with ropes on her wrists and a bar on her ankles, where she was found by the police. He also confessed to the grave desecrations and even guided the police to the graves he had looted. The macabre discoveries on Ed's farm unleashed a media storm. Reporters from all over the world arrived in the small town of Wisconsin, and the story shocked and fascinated both the public and the community alike. More than just a sensationalist note, the case touched on a burgeoning post-war anxiety, shattering the idyllic image of rural America and introducing a new and terrifying archetype into the cultural lexicon: the quiet and modest neighbor who harbored monstrous secrets. By January of 1958, Ed was charged with the first-degree murder of Bernice. The authorities decided not to press charges for Mary's murder or the desecrations, considering that a single charge was sufficient given his mental state. The detectives managed to gather key evidence, including the antifreeze receipt, the blood in Bernice's hardware store, testimonies from neighbors about Ed's truck, and his history of strange behavior. However, after undergoing psychiatric evaluations, Ed was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and declared unfit for trial. Instead, he was committed to a state hospital for criminals with mental illnesses, where he remained under treatment for a decade. During all that time, the community was devastated. The neighbors who saw Ed as a strange but harmless man couldn't believe he was capable of such atrocities. Bernice's son faced immense pain under public scrutiny, while from Mary Hogan's family, whose death was not judged, there was no relevant news. The national press exploited the case by dubbing it the Plainfield Butcher and publishing sensationalist headlines detailing the macabre objects in his house. The coverage generated hysteria with macabre jokes circulating and reports on the psychological impact on the community. The farm became a magnet for onlookers until March 20, 1958, when it burned in a suspicious fire, possibly set by neighbors who wanted to erase the stigma from their town. When Ed was informed of the fire that had consumed his farm, he barely reacted. That property, a scene of unimaginable horrors, vanished in flames as if the fire were trying to erase a dark part of history. After the fire, some rumors suggest that parts of the farm were sold as souvenir items. It is said that a local businessman bought the land, but the destroyed house and Ed's personal belongings, which initially attracted morbid interest, did not generate even a significant auction due to public repulsion. His car, the same one he had used to transport the bodies, was auctioned shortly after. A carnival operator acquired it and turned it into a macabre attraction, charging 25 cents to the curious who wished to see the vehicle. Thus the years passed, turning Ed into a legend while he remained confined in a mental institution. By November 7, 1968, after more than a decade locked up, the man was finally declared competent to stand trial, which focused on the murder of Bernice. There was no jury to avoid media influence. The prosecution presented physical evidence, the victim's body, the rifle, and the human skin objects, while Ed's defense pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, supported by psychiatric reports highlighting his schizophrenia and obsession with his mother. After a week of presenting evidence and witnesses, finally on November 14, 1968, Edward Theodore Gain, 62 years old, was found guilty of first-degree murder, but not criminally responsible due to his mental state. He was sentenced to indefinite confinement in psychiatric institutions, returning to the Central Hospital. The sentence divided the community. Some neighbors felt relieved knowing he would never be released again, while others believed he deserved to go to prison. Bernice's son accepted the verdict, although the pain of losing his mother persisted. Over time, Ed's health deteriorated, and by the late 1970s he was transferred to a mental health institution. During his stay, he was described as a quiet patient. There, in a clinical setting and away from the world he once terrorized, he died on July 26, 1984 at 77 years old. The cause was respiratory failure caused by lung cancer. His body was buried in his family's plot in a local cemetery among the remains of his parents and his brother Henry. However, not even death managed to silence his infamy. His tombstone became an object of worship for resource hunters, who for years chipped away fragments of the stone as if they were relics. Finally, in the middle of the year 2000, the entire tombstone was stolen. The authorities recovered it a year later near Seattle and decided to safeguard it to prevent further desecrations. Ed's behavior transcended and became a constant source of inspiration for film, literature, and the true crime genre. The specific and documented details of his psychosis, his relationship with his mother, his grave robbing, and his craftsmanship with human remains were so uniquely disturbing that they provided the raw material for some of the most iconic villains in fiction. Despite the time that has passed, Ed's influence remains alive in the collective imagination, establishing him as a symbol of American horror. But beyond film and literature, Ed's legacy is a warning about the dangers of extreme isolation, emotional neglect, and social invisibility. His story reminds us that horror does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers from the neighbor's house. The echo of his acts is much more than a tale of atrocious crimes. It is a journey into the abysses of the human mind. A man shaped by isolation, control, and an obsession that led him to cross unimaginable boundaries. Although his crimes inspire fictional monsters, they also sparked a debate about the ethics of glorifying killers in the media, as it is necessary for us to reflect on the shadows that dwell within all of us and on how evil can hide behind the neighbor's door. It also forces us to ask, what turns a person into a monster? Is it the product of his environment, his fractured mind, or something deeper that we still do not understand? Yeah, what do you think? And with that, we reach the end of this story. I hope it has left you thinking, because sometimes reality surpasses any fiction. If this case has impacted you, don't forget to leave your like and share it with those you think would also enjoy it. Before saying goodbye, I would love to know where you are watching us from. Leave me your comment below. It's great to know from which part of the world you are joining us because we build this space together, and if you like real cases that make you think, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos. See you in the next one. Until next time,